Jeremiah Craig coming at you for another edition of Ask the Bootmaker. Today we are talking with Paul from PK Bootmaker out of Presscott, Arizona. Hey Paul, how's it going?
Ah, we did it.
We did it. How's your day going so far?
Um, you know, it's interesting. It was a rebound from the mood and the funk that I was in last night from life, the world, the whole thing, all that stuff. I was feeling it, but I've been talking myself up.
Let's get right into the discussion here because I'm feeling the same way. I'm like on a huge rebound. So let's work off that energy. Can you give us an origin story of how you became a bootmaker and created PK Bootmaker Company? Just like episode one, like the pilot of your TV show, if you were to have one.
A Boy Scout, hobby leathercraft. I still have my Lucky Seven stamping tools. Um, it was my hobby on every application I filled out as a teenager. Um, I found out my draft number was coming up on my birthday. I joined the Air Force. When I got out, I didn't want to do that. Didn't succeed at getting a job as a lucrative roofer, which I thought that's good money. I'll do that. And I walked into a shoe repair shop and they put me to work the next day. I did that for 25 years, raising my family. Made three pair of boots. The first pair was in a boot repair shop. That was all we did. It was during the urban cowboy thing. Justin, Nakona, Tony Lama, Dan Post, they all sent their referrals, their accounts to our shop to get their customers' boots repaired because they'd closed down their boot repair shops because it was like all hands on deck. So for 4 years, I did that. That's where I made my first pair with a Utah Mormon shoemaker standing over my shoulder. Said, "I don't know boots, but we can understand this. It's okay." And I love what I learned from him. His humility was just a perfect example for me. I would screw up in something, and he'd come over, he'd look over at my shoulder, and he'd say, "Now you see, if you'd let me do it, then it would be my fault." And that I've used that a million times since then because it was such a good way to look at life, you know. But finished doing shoe repair during the early 90s. While you wait, shoe repair was maniacal, and I burnt out. Moved to Phoenix, worked for 5 years for Galco Gun Leather. I was working their belt department and missed customer service, especially after I got chewed out for being a quarter-inch off on the way a belt was punched. But I could have talked the customer out of it, and I figured, I got to get on my own where I can deal with my own customer. You know what I mean? So we moved up to Prescott with a plan, and it changed, and we decided let's just see what happens next. And I pulled out D.W. Fromer's book that I'd used for those, at least the second and third pairs of boots. And for 5 years, I kept it open on my bench. They say you can't call yourself a bootmaker until you've thrown about a dozen pair in the corner. I don't know if you've ever heard that or not, but it's a process. It's not a finger snap. And it was after about 5 years that I decided that I could maybe take on that appellation of being a bootmaker. So it was all forward motion from there.
That's great. It seems like you have a lot of forward motion because your boots are just beautiful. And just this opening segment right now where you're talking about your come up and getting into boots, it seems like you have a lot of sayings. Either that's from like your your guide coming up, or it's like, and then you also have some on your website. The one that on your website that really stood out to me was your quote, "It's not brain surgery. Cowboy boot making is not brain surgery, but a brain surgeon couldn't do it." What does that mean for you?
Well, um, you know, the expression obviously, is something that people use to say that that's easy. It's not brain surgery. But on the other hand, the learning curve is kind of a painful thing. I mean, you have to assess yourself regularly, as you go through the failures, and you can only aspire to do better. And so the skill and the focus that a brain surgeon has uh, would take a while before he could bring those to bear to become a bootmaker. Bootmaking isn't even like shoemaking. There's shoemakers who come to Texas to learn how to make boots. There's a couple of great examples. One particular fellow in Sweden that I just really love. I spent a good bit of time with Tex Robbins several years back. I think they might have been family, but anyway, it's a process. It's different. So, and it's kind of hard, man.
What is the hardest thing about it? That was a question that I got from Lucas, who is on the stream right now. He was wondering, what is the most difficult part of the bootmaking process?
It's not cutting parts and fitting them together, except how one has to interpret fitting them together for that particular customer's feet, left and right. We spend, I mean, I have like, I haven't really counted them, or I did, but I don't remember, 16 or so measurements that we take, when we're fitting somebody up for a pair of boots. Dustin mentioned how many he takes. And you make notes, my instruction from DW is that you fit what's there. And so you have to like look and think and relate it to the last, that the leather's going to be pulled over, and turn that last into a representation of the customer's foot. And that's the stressful part, because now, you're getting into a soul, excuse the misspelling, but it's a thing that is close to that person and how they're going to fit and react to it. So there's a little bit of tension there. I don't get so tense anymore about getting a nice clean skive that doesn't show. Some of my fellow bootmakers would say it's sure taken me a long time to get a nice clean skive that doesn't show, but I'm working on that. So to go back to the brain surgeon deal, it's easy when one has the bad habit of recrimination, negative self-talk and stuff. But DW's counsel was really good for me. That helped a lot, and I like to share it. Is that you should always only ever find 3 things that you'll do better on the next pair. Don't do less than that, because you're fooling yourself. And don't do more than that, because it's just not that necessary to beat yourself up about it. It's a curve. You have to walk the curve. It takes the time.
Geez, that sounds like it's good advice for just about anything that you're doing in life.
That's why I have so many sayings on my page, because so much of what we do is relevant to persevering through life, no matter what it is we want to do. I truly believe that it can only be done by blood and sweat and tears. And that's what it's like for you as a musician. If somebody were to interview you, I'm sure you would pick out where the hardest part was, and think there's some others that you're not mentioning.
Oh yeah, all the time. I take that same approach too, not with that saying in mind, but I always listen to a recording that I made, and then when I make another recording, I'm trying to look back at those other ones and say, well, I didn't quite like this, let's simplify it, or add this, let's try something else in the mixing of it. And you're right, if you try to do too much at one time, if you try to make too much progress or not do enough, either you get frustrated or you get bored. And that 3 things seems like a really nice medium.
It does. I think so too. For me, I have found that if I have my relationship that I try to establish with my customer in my mind while I'm working on their boots, it helps me to persevere. I found this very interesting. I began to be aware that that's the way I'm made. When one day I had 2 customers in my shoe repair shop in San Mateo when I was in California. The first guy that came into my shop, um, I think he thought a little much of himself. I don't know what the problem. New customer to me. He just like really projected that I'm not going to do a good job for him, and he just really projected it. And it was like I was just really soaking it up, and I didn't. And I thought, look at what he did to me. You know, he had me telling myself I'm not going to do a good job, and I didn't do a good job. Now, on the other hand, I'd had a conversation, and I remember this man's name is Mr. Brown. They were brown pair of shoes, so it was like I was doing a brown thing in my head the whole time. Um, we'd had this long conversation, and while I was repairing his shoes, I got done with them, and it was like they were beautiful because I was replaying the conversation with Mr. Brown, who had confidence that I was going to do a good job on him, and we had this relationship and this rapport. And it was a while later before I kind of correlated the two of them, and I have since tried to turn that into a superpower, if you will, you know, to make a difference in the work
Yeah,
that I.
it sounds it. So, do you keep that in mind when working with people who might be coming into doing business with you with a negative mindset, or do you just turn away those people altogether now?
I, I usually don't engage with people that have a negative mindset. You know, um, I did have a time here in Prescott. I was screwing up a lot, and I didn't like the way I was acting about my customers. They were throwing me off my schedule, and I was doing the wrong steps. And I moved out of town, and I came home and I worked for a few years. I also got my hip replaced during that time. That might have been part of why I was grumpy and having trouble. Was the pain in the hip. But when I moved back into town, I determined I wasn't going to be that guy. I was just going to say yes to everybody. Say yes to everybody, except when the answer is no. But the answer is always yes, even if after I'm done answering, it sounds like a no. Just coming at the customer and coming at the task that I can do that. This is yes. This is an experience that I want to have, even if it's a painful one. It's one that I'm going to learn from.
Okay, I like that perspective. That's interesting and kind of runs into a question that I got from. Oh, there was actually a couple people asked this question. Is there a leather that is more challenging to work with or that you refuse to use when building boots?
Refusing to use. No, let's go with the challenging part. The answer is yes. There are leathers that are challenging, and I haven't experienced it so much as I consider it a process to learn how to work with it. I mean, other makers make with it. You know, what are they doing, or what's different? You know, that I'm doing it. I had a beautiful piece of French calf that I paid like 3 times as much as I could have for another calf. It wasn't French. Um, and it checked on the toe when I pulled it over on the end of the toe on the crimp board. The grain of it kind of just opened up, and it shouldn't have done that, and I addressed it, but I put them aside. And a few years later, when I was making a pair of boots for myself, I just turned them rough out and turned them into a pair for myself. And it turned out to be a bad piece of leather, but you know, it was high priced leather. And so as far as refusing to work on, so I've been married for 50 years, and you learn how to stay married for 50 years when you're married for 50 years. And my wife's not too nuts about me making another pair with elephant. So that's the first thing that comes to my mind is right now I'm refusing to work on elephant.
And why is that?
Huh?
Why is that?
Why? Oh, it is. Well, it's endangered, it's protected, it's monitored, it's this, it's that. It's just, there just aren't enough of those big beasts. And I just really believe there's a lot more to them than meets the eye. Consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
The consciousness that they have. I mean, how many people would love to have a mother that loved them the way that elephants seem to love those in their tribe, you know? thankfully I did. I'm so grateful for mine. She's 96 years old and she's doing great, or at least she says that the doctor tells her she's in good shape for the shape she's in. So, uh, I wish that for everybody, but elephant it's a special thing. It represents mother, although mother isn't shaped like the elephant.
I respect that.
It does make me think of a joke my dad used to say, but I'm not going to use it on your broadcast here.
Oh, why not? You can't just leave us hanging like that.
Oh, well, he was a big beer drinker. I mean, he had a huge belly. I mean, there was a period of time where it was 16-ounce six packs of Brew 102 a night. It was
Whoa.
so he had a lot of beer belly. And when anybody would say anything about him, he says, "Yeah, I'm pregnant with an elephant, and the trunk's already hanging."
Oh my gosh. He sounds like a piece of work.
Oh, he was a character, man. He was a.
Love it. So, getting back to making boots, I had a question from Barry, and he was wondering about your fitting process and the sizes. He asks, do you use standard sizes like 9D, 11B, or what is your fitting process for customers?
I I start with standard sizes and I individualize them according to the shape primarily. First, always starts with the shape. Then it starts with the individual measurements, circumferences. You know, the shoe stores sell what they can get now, and so unfortunately, that's almost like beside the point. I'm sure you've done videos about it on the past. You know, the factories aren't making a B anymore. You can't walk into a Western store and have the guy come out with an 11B, which was the most common B that I ever saw all those years of doing shoe repair. So, you know, after I've taken all those measurements, I find that, okay, maybe I am going to order an 11B for you, but I've got to add this leather out here on this lateral side because you seem to have a swing to your foot. Your measurement's right, but I'm not going to ask you to force your foot into something that's straighter than your foot is. So shape is like so very, very much important. With the popularity of toe thongs, people's feet have gotten misshapen that much more because it really contributes to that. Toe thong sandals do. But there were a few customers before I really started to get precise and attack it in an orderly way, where it took me a couple of days to get a last that fit the shape and measurements of my customer. After that, I make a fitter's model, a test fit boot. I think other guests of yours mentioned that they use that technique. It reassures the customer that the money I'm asking for what I'm making for them is going to fit, that I'm going to care about it, certainly. And it reassures me that I'm going to put all this work into it and I'm going to get pretty darn close, if not right on.
So you make 2 pairs of boots every time you make a pair of custom boots for somebody. The fitting pair is the first pair, and then you make one off of that.
I could say yes to that, but the first one is an abbreviated version.
Okay.
Okay. I use remnant leather. For the counter, I don't use stiff, hard, sturdy, quality leather for the heel counter. I use belly. I mean, all I got to do is ask it to shape and dry and to stay in size until my customer gets his foot in there and draws it out again, and then its job is done, you know. So I do make 2. I heard a story about one other bootmaker several years back that he did make 2 pair of boots. The first pair was a pair of black cowhide boots that he made, and you got to keep them, and you're going to be paying for them along in the way. But that way, you know, he was a little bit more precise. But whew, taking that all the way to the end is a whole lot of extra hours when all you're trying to do is make a test of the negative space that you've created for the customer's foot by your alteration on that 11B last.
That's interesting. And I like that approach because that has to make both you and the customer feel much better about trying the end result on. It's not like so much pressure because I heard on a couple of other interviews that I've done is that that moment when somebody actually tries the boot on is the most pressure and the most stress to a lot of bootmakers.
Yes, it is, certainly. Yeah. Even with doing a fitter, I mean, risk is just around the corner. I mean, you step out your back door out there behind you, you don't know what's going to be on the other side. It's life. Right? It's life. The other thing about a standard size is that 11B, 9D, whatever, relates to the length from heel to ball, not the extra length from the ball of the foot to the toe. That's special requested. The style may be pointier than a rounded toe, so it's going to be longer instead of rounded. So that it's heel to ball because that's where a boot works. If you're not fitting a ball, you're not fit at all. Same Lucchese's. But sometimes a person's got a very low instep and a very short heel, I mean, a very low measurement short heel. And that's because of the shape of their foot. And if you don't take that into consideration, if you don't know that, given the 11B measurements and their width measurements that you've added, the guy's heel's going to slip up and down because it's not locked into place over the instep. So an 11B isn't necessarily an 11B. Maybe to get that instep to be tight for that guy, you're going to have to use something like maybe a double A, because that's going to reduce that circumference there from the short heel area. And there's, lots of other ways to make adjustments at all. And some bootmakers, somebody like Lee Miller, and if you haven't, I hope you get to interview him.
I hope so too.
Yeah, really. But some of them have tricks that have been passed down through the centuries, and that's a very cool thing.
Yeah, it really is. And with all of this in mind as you're building boots, I'm wondering, how has your history in shoe repair influenced your boot making career now? Have you brought anything from that life to this?
It's interesting what I brought to bootmaking first. I found, and I couldn't even hardly stop myself. I arrived apologetically that I was coming from shoe repair. I don't know where it was coming from. I'd heard years ago that there are cultures that view the shoe repairman among the lowest of cultures. And it's like, that's okay. I'm serving, and that's important to me. I don't care if I'm viewed as, a lower class, but I like what I do. I'm serving the needs of my community. But when I showed up in the bootmaking community, I projected a family environment. There was that, any bootmaker that there was that I didn't know had learned in his, inherited stuff from his family, the family line deal. I come to find out that those days had passed, a couple of decades before I showed up in the 80s, 90s. So forgot what the question was, going sideways like that.
Bringing shoe repair experience to bootmaking.
Okay, so here I have this premise every once in a while coming to my mind that yes, I'm a bootmaker and I came through it for shoe repair, but then I had a job where I was asked if I would resize a woman's father's pair of boots, an alligator, that was 3 sizes too big, and could I resize them for her? I think she called me because her husband was in the border guard here in Arizona, and she was from Oklahoma. And it's like, well, yes, I think I could, and I hadn't really done too many out-of-state customers yet that would have to travel or ship their work to me. And I wanted to measure my customers anyway. So I told her, here's 3 names of bootmakers back in Oklahoma. Give these folks a call and see if anybody will do it for you. I didn't know who 2 of the 3 were, but the first guy said, no, I'd rather make a pair of boots than repair, take apart or whatever. And I think the other guy said, no, it's not even possible. It's not even possible. And then the third person was Lisa Sorrell, and she says, well, you should call Paul Krause. He does that. It's like, was like, oh gosh, that was kind of a cool, flattering thing to hear. We later did a collaboration on a little project like that, which I was very tickled about. But so she comes back to me and she tells me this, and she comes out and her boyfriend and her come into my shop, and I fitted her all up, and I really loved the both of them, and it was just really a compelling story. Father wasn't alive to walk her down the aisle, and he had walked her sister down the aisle, but now she had his alligator boots, and she was going to have him with her if she could walk down the aisle in them. I'm in. As I'm working
That's
on
so
it,
cool.
I'm thinking the guys who had said no um, didn't view the opportunity to service the way that I went through my whole years of shoe repair. And so it's like, you know, all those 4 years that I was at that boot shop during the Urban Cowboy thing, we changed out components regularly. I mean, we knew how much to expand an insole when we changed out a sweated out insole on a boot. We knew this, that, and the other of their construction because we worked in the pieces of them and everything. So I just, as I was working on them, I'm thinking, I'm really thankful for those 25 years of shoe repair that gave me the confidence to be able to do this for this young lady. And there have been several other, I've been called a lot. I come up as resizing boots in the Google search or whatever, and people will call up and I'll tell them my first requirement is that the boot be a genuine candidate for it. I won't do it a plastic welt or paper insoles. Um, they have to be a quality, traditionally Western or a cowboy construction boot, a Texas made cowboy boot. Nothing from Canada. No offense, Canada. You're some of my favorite people. Not made in some other country. I need to know what to expect when I dive in there because there's only one way out. I've just got sentiment attached here. You know what I mean? It has to be successful. So that was my qualifier. The boot has to be a genuine candidate for it. And then your emotional attachment is going to have to be pretty great to them also, because, well, the first one I did was 650, but then for her, I think she was 850. And now I'm probably closer to $1,000 to do it because I totally take the boots apart. I separate all of the components and I pick all of the stitches out of all the holes because that's the only way I can really get a clear picture rather than trying to work around clutter. So those years of shoe repair just really gave me an understanding of how to do proper service when I'm doing custom work for people.
That's great. And I love your outlook on it because boots are such a personal thing because they last so long and there's so many memories attached to them. So when you can take one generation's and fix it and make it appropriate for the next, as far as fit and sizing and everything, that is such a special thing to be able to pass that down.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's why we do what we do. I've said before.
I love it. That was such a great story. Thank you for sharing that. I got a question about the Opanka style boots because you're the only one that I've ever seen make a Western cowboy boot style with the Opanka uh, stitch. Can you explain this to me? Because I've never seen it before.
I bet you have. Have you ever been to a Mexican food restaurant that had a mariachi band?
Not a live one, no.
Not a live one. There is a traditional boot worn by mariachi players that I saw them in Southern California when I lived in the San Diego area. But the first time I saw them was in the early 80s, this boot. This, on my website, I've got a picture of one that's made the Mexican botín charros is what it's.
Okay. Are they really pointy?
Yeah, well, no,
Yeah.
no, not necessarily, but the toe
Okay.
comes in, but not point. Botín charros or dude boots is what that literal translation is. Botín boots, charros are what dudes. So they came into my shoe repair shop, and it's like, these are really cool, but God, I hate the way it looks on the toe. And look at what they have to do to the heel to get the heel to attach. And it's like, oh, that is the coolest, terrible thing I've ever seen. So it like stuck in the back of my head, right? And I wondered about it off and on during the years and years and years. And we eventually moved to Prescott, and I've got some time on my hand. And I've been chewing on how do I overcome the issues that I objected to about the construction of that. And so I played a little bit, and I've got a box full of playing all around up there, and another box of playing around up over there. And I kind of decided, well, it'll come to me because I don't know what to do about the lining and other issues. I don't know. So years go by. Finally, Marcel Marsan, master shoemaker from Hungary, who I feel fortunate has sort of taken me under his wing. He shared three poor ink quality copies of pages of a Japanese shoemaker making the style of shoe using this technique with the shoe. I thought I would grab a shoe for your readers, your watchers.
Yes.
This is the style construction that we're talking about. So the sole construction is the trick, and that was my challenge, how to figure out how to do that. You notice that it doesn't come all the way around the toe. When the sole comes around the toe, personally, I didn't like it, so that was part of my quest. And the heel is built more like you would expect in a traditional Western boot. It's, integrated with the back edge of the sole. Okay, so the heel and sole are one unit back here. So these two features were my variation. And the Turkish and Italian guys who make these, they do this all the way back to here, which is cool enough, but a little more challenging, especially if you've got a boot with some heel to it. So I just figured, I'll just do it up in the front part there like that. And I almost didn't care whether anybody else liked it or not. It was fun to make, and it looks cool. And thankfully, my wife she wears hers regularly. I've got a couple pair myself that I wear. I'm about ready to make another variation on it, just because I like the international spin. The Navajo moccasins, they have that white alum tanned leather sole that turns up like that. It's usually suede or split leather on the top. I saw it in one of my suppliers, and I ordered a side of that white alum tanned leather. And I'm going to call it a slipper using, black wax calf skin that I got from Greg Carmack, Orion Leather, Waco, Texas. I don't have his phone number, I'd say it. But Greg sent me a piece of waxed French calf, and it's going to be kind of a cool combination. I'm looking forward to it. We'll see.
Yeah, that sounds interesting. I'm looking forward to seeing it too. What is the advantages and disadvantages of the Opanka style?
Yeah. At first I was saying that it's more flexible. And my own experience, I wear a size 12, it is more flexible. And it's a variation on the Baltic country folk dance shoe. We've seen the folk dance shoe where the leather comes all the way up, and on the toe it kind of comes up, and it's usually kind of wrapped up around the toe, the leather is, and it's woven over the vamp, over the front part of it, and it's a traditional folk dance shoe. So I had a lady who was doing salsa dancing, and I was talking to her about this, and she thought she would like to try it, especially since this has kind of like a botín charros kind of vibe to it. She thought it would be kind of cool. And the trouble was that she wore a size 4. And by the time all those layers were joined together in that short period of space, and the sole they were too stiff for her. So that benefit is kind of relative to who you are and what size you've got.
Interesting.
Yeah. But other than that, if it's for casual wear, I wouldn't recommend it for anything any hard wearing. But for casual wear, the ones that I've made for myself that I have PK Bootmaker put on the graft on the front of the tops, they're holding up now. I think it's been 5 years since I made them. And, I'd clean them up put a little polish on the edge of the. It's so cool to see this. This is actually saddle skirting. This leather is because it'll shape up like this, and still it'll remain kind of firm after it's been dried, after being wet. You know, it firms up well, so that serves the purpose. And so, but it scuffs. It doesn't have the scuff-resistant qualities that upper leather does. So there's a brand of polish that I use. It's got a lot of pigment to it that kind of brings this color back again, and it just pops it really nice.
That is so cool. It seems like you are doing a lot of that, and you even won awards for your Apanco boots in the past. Is that correct?
Yep. The pair that I made for my wife, a little 6-inch zipper boot with a little fringe out of bison leather. They got a first place award in Sheridan, Wyoming, a few years back. As a leathercraft show. I haven't entered it in any of the Bootmakers competitions, that style. There's things that I want to do with it, and I'm still playing with it and learning what the limitations are. You know, it's like I'm happy to share the PDF that well, it is PDF, but the PowerPoint step-by-step process. I'm happy to share that, but there's still things that need to be considered, you know, depending on variables within the footwear style or something like that. So there's, you know, it's still on a learning curve.
No doubt. I can only imagine. It's a very unique look that I don't see very often. I think it's really interesting. What are the goals that you have? Speaking about the progress that you want to make with the Opanka, and talking about the things that you want to learn. Do you have goals that you have as a bootmaker that you're looking to achieving at some point in the future?
I instead of describing it as something that I'm looking to achieve in the future, I've been using the adjective to aspire. I aspire for my for the soles on the shoes that I'm making now, because I'm making some shoes, not as many as I should have by now. But I aspire from my work to be worthy of entering in the federation shows and the international shows in Europe someday. It didn't happen as soon as I was thinking when I first started saying it that way. It's like we're still working the curve, because that's tough, especially hand stitching soles on. The guys who show in these shows, it's almost like it's impeccable. And it's almost very difficult to believe that it's done by hand. But it is achievable. So it's something that I aspire to do. The other thing that I'm looking forward to, and I continue to, is to be worthy of being a bootmaker, a shoemaker, a leather worker that young people call and ask a question of. Every time I've had that, I've probably had a half a dozen or so that have become really close friends because they wanted to take a chance and ask if, sir, would you please show me how to do this or whatever? You know, I mean, it's like I feel funny being called sir or Mr. Krause. I tell them that was my dad, you know, call me Paul. But to be thought of as, you know, having something of value to share with somebody who's coming up is important to me, because I met some threshold guardians. Are you familiar with Joseph Campbell's work on mythology?
No.
It's an incredible thing. His thesis work, his grand work, contribution was called A Hero of a Thousand Faces. And when he's outlining the different adventures that are common in cultures across time of the hero's journey as it relates to the threshold guardian. The threshold guardian is that gargoyle or the dragon that's out in the moat, out in front of the castle, and the aspirant, the knight, the adventurer has to slay the dragon to get into the castle to rescue the beautiful princess and to achieve his holy grail. So the threshold guardian is a real thing, and if you aren't prepared to deal with the fact that here's this person who's standing in my way and they won't let me pass. They won't tell me how can I learn this, or they won't tell me what this tool is or how to use it. That's how I relate to this, and I don't want to be that guy. I've seen guys like that, and I'm kind of glad for one of them. I mean, I learned something because I pushed myself to figure it out for myself, but it would just, it binds people together, when we're encouraging to one another, and that's got to be one of the coolest parts about the Facebook groups that have come up now. My good friend Wes Schubert is just one of the most fun guys that I know. I just love him. He made this pair of tops for me.
Wow.
He did the tops and sent them to me in this blue, and it's like, Wes, these are a little bit too punchy for me. I mean, I wear Western boots, not cowboy boots. You know what the difference is? Have you heard this yet?
What's the difference?
Between a cowboy boot and a Western boot, one of them has the manure on the outside. So Wes made these tops, and I kept them around for a long time, and I finally decided I would just put some brown work leather on them. And so these are my Wes Schubert, Paul Krause, PK Bootmaker boots. So, but there's a bunch of young guys. Wes, well, I'll still call him young because he's younger than I. But there's a lot of guys in their 40s and 50s that are coming up that they've broken in. I mean, they're making it. They're doing incredible work, and they're encouraging each other. And I just think that's fantastic. Instead of being jealous, I mean, the bootmakers of the 60s and before that, it was like there weren't enough customers, and so everyone was precious. And I really thought it was funny when I found out that John Wayne had boots made by lots of bootmakers who said that they were the maker for John Wayne's boots. So, I mean, they're just highly competitive. And now it just seems like, no, man, I got all the work I can. I'm taking care of my family. I'll be glad to help you out with this. Wes had a deal. I just wish it would have come together. There were going to be 4 bootmakers. We were going to come together, and over a period of time, and it was all going to be filmed. And we were like going to be interacting with each other, or we'd have a week, alone to do it. I mean, I was very excited about that possibility. The whole spirit of collaboration feels like something that's possible within the shoe trade, and it's starting to be done now more and more.
Yeah, that's awesome. It sounds like a great idea. It kind of reminds me of like the cooking reality shows where you get like 3 cooks on one team and 3 cooks on another team. That would be a really fun competition video series to watch.
It would be.
Maybe I'll have to make it in the future.
Oh, so it's been talked about before. Somebody had a lot of juice for it probably 10 years ago, but it didn't seem to be very practical, and it didn't really come about.
Well, we'll see what happens in the future.
I would want to be Tim Gunn.
Tim Gunn?
Gunn, yeah.
I'm not familiar.
You're not familiar?
I don't watch it. No, I don't watch it.
I learn a lot from those shows.
I bet.
One of the things that Tim Gunn, who was like the counselor, the mediator, the guy who kind of like encouraged and coached, he was always telling some designer to edit, edit, edit. What do you do with that? Edit, edit, edit. Think about the word 3 times. What does that mean? Edit, edit, edit. And when you start looking at your work and what you've done, and you refined it, because you've reduced a lot of the clutter that's out there. You've got it down to, well, now this is the essence. You've edited it down to the essence, and that's the goal. So a little phrase like that, it's like, wow, that's a good one. I like that one. So I learned a lot from watching Project Runway.
That's a good takeaway, and a good reason to watch shows like that. Just especially in your industry. We're running out of time here on Instagram, So I just want to make sure that everybody knows how to contact you uh, to get boots from you. So how does somebody order boots from you? What's the best way to go about it?
Online through uh, Paul at Noaz Leatherworks, Noaz Leatherworks with an S .com. That's my email address. Facebook Messenger is probably easiest for most people who are on these Facebook, of course. My website is unattended to, so I don't really, I don't even know if it's connected to my email. You know, I haven't been the smartest guy about handling the money for a website. But
It does. It has your email and stuff on there.
yeah, my phone number is 928-442-1213, but I don't pick it up because there's too many robocalls. My cell phone number is on there, so use that when you call. You'll get calling. And I don't work
Perfect.
in town.
Paul,
I work from my home workshop, so I don't have a downtown address anymore. Thank you, Craig.
thank you, Paul, for spending this time and for sharing all your great stories and expertise. This was awesome. It was great. And if anybody gets a chance to visit Paul and Presscott, definitely do it because, geez, just sharing your knowledge here was amazing. Thank you so much.
All right, and thank you for what you're doing also. You're doing great, Jeremiah. Thank you, sir.
Appreciate it. I love it. Have a great rest of your day, Paul, and thanks everybody for watching.